You're listening to the Mind Over Murder podcast.
My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway Murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook group together with Kristin Dilley.
My name is Kristin Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas. Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristin Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
And welcome to another episode. We are looking forward to talking to you about any number of things. We've passed our first Parkway anniversary of the year on April 9th. It marked 33 years since the disappearance of Keith Call and Cassandra Hailey.
These anniversaries, I guess from the point of view of a family member, you think about your lost loved one frequently, maybe every day in some examples, but there's something about the anniversaries and the holidays, I think especially, it just makes it really, really difficult. So when you get to the anniversary of their death, their birthday, Christmas, New Year's, those kind of things really seem to resonate. Very, very sorry to see another year go by with no resolution in the Keith Call, Cassandra Hailey case.
There were some wonderful recollections and reflections from Joyce Call on her page, which we also posted on the Colonial Parkway Murders page, as she was thinking about what it means to have passed another year without her younger brother. So we do encourage you to take a look at the Colonial Parkway Murders page and take a look at the things that Joyce Call Canada has written and shared. She also included some photos of Keith, which Bill and I like seeing photos because it really does it brings their memory closer to us. Teri, Hailey, Holman, who we talk with later on the podcast, also shared some photos on her personal page. And it was nice to see some different photos of Cassandra, especially because they were ones that I had not seen before. And it's always nice to see them as they were.
That era of photography, remember, this is a pre-digital environment. Now, of course, we shoot photographs with digital cameras and with our cell phones, and they're available and easily transmitted from one place to another. So you see them on Facebook, Twitter, social media, and so on. And Instagram in particular seems to be made for photographs, essentially. As all of us dig through our own personal family archives, we find more photographs of our loved ones. And it is really cool to see pictures of Keith and Sandy that we've never seen before, that have been probably sitting in a photo album or maybe in a drawer for years. And then suddenly, there they are, and they can be shared much more widely than they would have been back when they were originally taken.
And the media outlets, they do an excellent job of making sure that there are photos of all of the victims, but they tend to be the same photos over and over. Yeah. And so it is nice to see ones that are different, because it does remind you that these were people who had vibrant, rich lives, and they were not just reduced to the photo that we see on the Lovers Lane murders or, on any other television or print reporting. Our thoughts and prayers and hearts go out to the Call family and the Hailey family, as always, on this anniversary. As always, we hope that this will be the year for answers and for justice.
It's interesting, in today's episode of Mind Over Murder, this is part 2 of our discussion with Teri, Hailey, Holman, and Paula, Hailey, Meehan, and you really pick up on the frustration that they're feeling. Here we are at the 33-year mark, and they make some pretty sharp criticisms of the way the case has been handled, and in particular, the way the case feels almost stalled now in April 2021. And I think it's a fantastic episode, a great discussion with the two of them. I am confident that a careful listen, you'll pick up their significant frustration.
We are looking forward to having members from the Call family, as well as the other Colonial Parkway Murders victims' families, on in future episodes. We would like to highlight a case from our friends at Othram Labs, who, full disclosure, as I'm sure you guys are aware by now, are sponsors of our podcast, proud sponsors, we hope we can say.
Thank you.
Of our podcast. They are looking right now for your crowdfunding support for DNA testing for a case that they are calling Saginaw John Doe. And this is a case from October of 1988 in Saginaw, Michigan. Authorities responded to an unidentified body that was found in Saginaw, Michigan. It was the body of an African-American man. They do not give an age, but it is a young man. He looks to me to be about high school age. Considering that I teach high schoolers, everybody at a certain point starts to look like they're high school age. He had died only hours prior. So this isn't a case in which a body was too degraded for an identification. There just is no ID for this young man. He is reported as being about 5'7", 165 pounds, brown eyes, black hair. He had a little bit of a mohawk with a fade on the sides, really light mustache, and that he was wearing a green and yellow t-shirt, black jeans, Nike Air tennis shoes, 2 gold chains at the time of his death. To this point, there has been no identification of this body. So Othram is working to crowdfund to get the $5,000 needed for DNA identification of Saginaw John Doe.
They've used some forensic artists over the years to do different paintings of what they believe this young man looked like. And then hopefully with this DNA testing, we can get a proper identification. Something heartbreaking about this case, which is I just have such a hard time believing this young guy goes missing and is found dead, and then no one claims him. And I just find that so heartbreaking.
Yeah, as do I. We are so glad to learn that Othram is going to be working on this case. Now, there is an update. And by the way, all of the information that we are sharing with you all is available on the DNA Solves website, which is Othram's website where they do highlight their cases. So we do encourage you to go to DNA Solves and take a look. One of the updates from late March that was posted on the DNA Solve site is that investigators have shared that this young man may have attended either Martin Luther King High School or John Cooley High School in Detroit prior to or during 1988. Now, Bill and I were talking offline and wondering how that information was obtained, but that is all the information that they have at this time with relation to this young man. If you're interested in supporting the crowdfunding for DNA testing for Saginaw John Doe, we do urge you to go to DNAsolves.com, and we will, of course, put links on our social media pages, both Mind Over Murder and Colonial Parkway Murders.
These open questions that we have, we're very fortunate in that our friend David Middleman is going to be returning to Mind Over Murder, and we're going to be asking him questions, and we definitely want to do a deep dive on Saginaw John Doe. I think we can get into a great discussion with David on this case and a number of other cases, and we're very excited about that. We'll be announcing that one shortly.
And we'd like to end by giving a heartfelt thank you and shout out to loyal listener Robert Gray, who wrote us a truly outstanding and frameable, I'm actually going to print this out and frame it, a wonderful review of Mind Over Murder on Podchaser. Robert, we really just cannot thank you enough for the kind words. They definitely keep us going, and we thank you so very much for being so kind and so supportive.
On top of everything else, Robert Gray then turned around and made a very generous contribution, which we also very much appreciate. So this is the kind of thing where you'd hold up this review and say, see, Mom and Dad, this is why we do this.
Yes, yeah, for sure. For sure. So, Robert, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And because Robert did post that on Podchaser, a donation to Meals on Wheels was also part of this excellent outcome. So we do encourage you all to post reviews. They don't have to be long. Through the month of April, they will be donating to Meals on Wheels for every podcast review that is posted on their site. So we do encourage you to do that, whether it's our podcast or someone else's. Thank you so much for listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll see you next time.
And we're back with Teri, Hailey, Holman, and Paula Meehan, sisters of Cassandra, Hailey. Teri and Paula, thank you for joining us again.
Thanks for having us.
How you doing?
Well, now, Paula, do you like Paula Hailey Meehan too? Do you like to use your maiden name in the middle?
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Either way.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, either way.
As long as we don't call you, late for dinner or something bad.
It is now 2021, and you all do have a anniversary coming up here. I feel like I hate using that word anniversary, but
those are supposed to be fun.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like there's any better term for it, though. Give us a little status check-in on how you feel now that it is April 2021. The TV show has come out. It is now 33 years.
Oh, gosh. You're making me do
33?
First question is math question.
We can take this out. I think is it
Engineering
33
student.
It's been
33.
It's been 33 years.
Mm-hmm.
How are you all feeling about the lack of forward movement in this case?
Just as frustrated as we were day one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably more so.
Probably more so. The more mistakes we learn that happen, it probably becomes more frustrating.
What has
And
been
the lack of urgency.
Yeah.
I was going to say, what has been the biggest source of frustration for you? If you could only pick one.
And if we could pick one, the fact that, is it case really being worked? I feel like I've spent more time on it in the last couple of months than the FBI probably has. I kind of just started thinking about what happened if when Keith and Cassandra left the party that they didn't go down Route 17, that maybe they went down Warwick Boulevard instead, because if I remember correctly, when I went to school there, as you left University Square Apartments, I think you had to go right because it was there was a median. And then if you wanted to, you could do it. You had to go down and do a U-turn. So maybe they didn't do that. Maybe they just went, because Keith being from Gloucester, maybe he didn't want to go all the way around down 17 to go to the bridge. He could have just kept going straight, and that was his normal way of going home from school. I've just kind of thought about maybe different things along than what the normal
what we've been thinking all along.
Yeah, what have we been thinking all along?
Trying to freshen up your thinking a little bit on it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thinking outside the box, unlike what our agent's been doing.
Yeah. Or agents, the millions of agents that have been on the case. Right. It just seems like it's like a stepping stone to your next career kind of thing. And I'm sure there's boxes and boxes of information that no one person can go back and review and get a fresh look at and come up with new ideas or
how about just process the stuff that's in the box?
Yeah.
Well, when you say process, you mean evidence from the crime scenes and so on?
Right. Stuff that was collected in the investigation from the beginning that evidently was not ever thoroughly vetted through the system that could be a potential lead that's just been sitting in a box that nobody bothered to finish processing.
Do you know what sorts of evidence that is that you are hoping to have processed?
Yes.
Can you share with the class?
Should I?
Well, Bill, what do you think?
Answer the question and then we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
If it's not good, we'll take it out.
The evidence from the vehicle, from the Subaru.
Okay. All right,
they have that. They haven't processed it. If he went to all that trouble to track it down and have that vehicle processed, why not? Yeah, why not test it?
Yeah, in this example,
he saw something needed to be tracked down. It was something to him at the time.
And in this example, I'll just flesh this out a little bit. We're going to leave names out of this. Sorry to disappoint our listeners. We have received new tips in the case, which we've been sending into the FBI. And so, Teri, you're referencing evidence from another vehicle of a potential suspect that we thought this person could have crossed paths, particularly we thought with Sandy.
Right.
And we gave this tip to the FBI last September, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you, in following up within the last few weeks, discovered that they still had not processed the evidence that you had requested.
But that evidence was collected back in the 80s.
Right.
Yeah.
Or the 90s.
And located within the last few months and still wasn't sent. That's the most frustrating part.
Well,
the evidence was located and then they are not processing it.
I've discovered, as you have recently, that FBI Quantico is so swamped. This is the Quantico lab where most of this processing takes place, that every single time we've had evidence which is submitted for testing or, to be fair to the FBI, retesting in some examples, it takes 6 months every single time. And I will say for the record, this is insane. This is why cold cases remain cold. Taking 6 months for every test, every single time, this is completely unacceptable. And we have to do better. I mean, literally as a country, we have to do better than this. It can't take 6 months to process evidence.
Right.
Now, you had written to the FBI to inquire about the status of some of this evidence, and the response was that they still had not processed something which we'd put on their radar last September.
Right.
And still nothing.
Still nothing.
One thing I do want to try to be fair to the FBI. In some of these examples, we're asking for testing to be conducted on evidence using techniques that are newer than 1988. In other words, that have come online since the 80s when this disappearance happened. But one of the impressions I've walked away with from talking to the FBI so many times about this case is that if you don't push for testing and retesting, you don't get the latest and greatest of the tests that came online unless you're asking for it. Teri, as you said, it feels like evidence could be sitting in the evidence room and never be retested if we didn't ask for it.
Right. Yeah. I really think that if we hadn't raised all the hell that we did 11 years ago, our stuff would still be sitting in a box, never, ever tested.
I would have to agree. And if we hadn't kicked up a fuss, and I think we're all committed here, the four of us on this on this episode are all committed to continuing to kick up a fuss.
Oh, you have not seen anything yet.
It's Teri, Hailey, Holman, Unbound, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to harp on the past, but I want to know why wasn't it tested the first time? Was it perhaps a change in agent that he was still waiting for it to be collected and it changed? That's been the problem the whole time. We get somebody on for 2 or 3 years and then somebody else comes along. And how much is that person catching up the last person catching up the next person on the case when they hadn't even done their homework for the last?
They don't. They just hand them a box and say, start reading.
Yeah.
How many agents have been on this case? Just out of curiosity.
We were trying to figure
10,
that out the
12.
other day.
Somewhere between 10 and 12, I think.
Bill, does that jive with what you're aware of?
It does. Now, one thing I think that's equally insane, although not as directly related to the case processing, is that we've had even more than that 10 or 12 figure in the special agent in charge, the SAC, the top person in the office. We've had dozens of those people, all men so far, actually. And for a while there, a few years ago, and Teri and Paula, you may remember this, we were actually having a new SAC more than once a year. And this is an office, there's 2 offices, Norfolk and Newport News, with over 200 people between the 2 offices.
What does that tell you?
You don't even know your job in a year.
Yeah.
I've run large operations. You don't even know everybody's name in a year when you have 200 people reporting to you.
Yeah.
There's a
problem.
Endless rotation of SACs. And then as Paula was saying, there also was a lot of rotation of case agents, the person that actually handles the day-to-day responsibilities for moving an investigation forward. You all just wrote a letter recently to the new person in charge. You've started a dialogue with him via email?
I guess you could call it that.
I guess it's more one-sided.
Well, you've been asking questions, and have you?
I've been asking questions.
Have you been receiving
I feel
answers?
like answers are a little bit stock answers, I didn't really, well, he took a few, he did answer me right away. I wrote it late on a Thursday night. He got back to me first thing in the morning on a Friday and said that he would get back with me. He did get back with me.
Attempt to answer.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, they don't want to comment on ongoing cases. I believe that was in there. There was also these cases may never be solved in there.
Yeah. The last comment was, this may be unsolvable.
Yeah.
Which is I'm bowing out kind of BS. I have a problem with that.
I've actually never seen an FBI agent ever say that before.
It's in writing. This may be unsolvable. There's no crime that's unsolvable. I have a problem with that. If they're already throwing those words out, it's already giving me that tone that they have no intention of seeing this through.
Right.
They're looking for their out.
Well, if they feel like they're at a dead end, why wouldn't they just work the angles that they haven't worked yet, or process the evidence that they have that they didn't process before?
Yeah, I would have to agree, and it's very frustrating to be told that requests that we made last September, here it is, 8 months later, still haven't been processed.
They haven't even contacted the person that tipped them off.
As far as we know, I will say the FBI is not.
I asked the person.
Okay. So you circle back, and the answer was no.
Yeah.
The FBI is not very good about answering straightforward questions in a straightforward manner.
We know how to get answers. It's called pick up the phone.
Well, and the thing is, a lot of this information has come from us, and we are fully capable of circling back and asking people questions about, have you heard from, or was there any follow-up?
Right.
Yeah, I was apprehensive about reaching out at first. I didn't know how to handle that. But then I was like, I'm just going to ask her, if they had been contacted by the FBI. And she was very kind and got back and said no, but she'd been thinking about our family every day.
So she's more than willing to talk with the FBI or anybody else that could be helpful.
Yes.
But she hasn't heard.
Not the last, and that was probably right about the time I wrote the letter to the FBI.
Mm-hmm. That's about a little less than 2 weeks ago.
A couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you like to see the public do to help your families out? We, at this point, do have a podcast. We have a TV series, and certainly the case has received a lot of attention over the years. You have a number of people out here in the listening public who are very interested and sympathetic. What can the public do to help move this forward?
I think they've been calling in since the show been on. Of course, even if you think it's not important, you should call, because it turns out sometimes it is important. I don't know. Other than if you were there at the party, you could at least give us more information about who else was at the party.
Well, and at the
loss of words is because it's just been so many years of no answers. I've got no answers.
No, understood. Bill, what were you going to say?
I think Paula makes a really good point, which is that if people think they may know something, they should reach out to us, to the FBI, or the Virginia State Police. And we'll add those numbers in the show notes for this episode. Because I don't think any of us as individuals, as citizens, civilians, can evaluate whether something might be important to the FBI or the Virginia State Police. And they might know a lot of things that we don't know, we the community doesn't know. So I think Paula's right. If people have something that they want to let the investigators know, they absolutely should reach out to us. If they don't want to deal with law enforcement, they can deal with us, and we'll get it to law enforcement. You're listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll be right back after these messages. One of the most frequent questions we're asked here at Mind Over Murder is, how can I help?
Thanks to Othram, a leading forensic DNA testing lab for law enforcement, you can get involved and help solve real cases.
If you have tested at a consumer genetics company, you can contribute your data to DNAsolves.com. The process is easy and confidential. Just 2 simple steps. Your DNA might be the missing piece that helps solve the identity of an unknown person.
Then Mind Over Murder will highlight cases Othram is working on to seek your crowdfunding support for DNA testing to help solve these cold cases.
Upload your DNA profile to DNAsolves.com. It's easy, free, and confidential.
Then join Mind Over Murder as we help families find answers with Othram and DNAsolves.com.
Welcome back to Mind Over Murder. Some of the tips that Teri and Paula have been talking about over the last few minutes came from the families, from our outreach. And I'll be frank, we got a significant amount of pushback from the FBI, and I'll be perfectly blunt here. We don't care. We've been waiting for over 30 years for answers. So if someone, for whatever reason, doesn't want to talk to the FBI or the Virginia State Police, then talk to us and we'll get the information to the investigators. We're not trying to solve this case on our own, but we'll do whatever it takes in terms of outreach to put information into the queue so that the investigators can take a look at it. And Paula's point that they may know something, let's put it out there. The television show has resulted in a bunch of new tips coming to us. And then the FBI agents told us they're getting calls to FBI headquarters where people are coming forward with what may be valuable information. I don't know. The important thing is people are talking.
Teri, you brought up the idea in a conversation that either you and I or all of us were having about writing to Congress people. Is that something that's still on your mind that you'd like to see people do?
I would like to see that. Absolutely. If we as families can't get the FBI to do their jobs and do what we ask them to do as family, then maybe other people can light a fire under them, because I don't know what else to do.
Paula, what are your thoughts on that, on reaching out to our elected leaders?
I think it's important. Maybe they can get it brought to the top of the stack, or at least to the middle of the stack of something that's important to the FBI, that they'll work a little harder on it, or at least deal with the information that you have available to you to get some yes or no answers. I mean, it's just ridiculous at this point. I mean,
there's no reason why they have items that need to be tested. Other people are offering labs to test it, and they're not taking advantage of those labs. That's ridiculous.
So maybe if we get our senators or congressmen involved, they can speak to somebody. Bobby Scott was originally, I think his district must have been in CNU area, because at the time he contacted my mother, and he's still a congressman to this day. So maybe he'd be willing. I've been wanting to reach out to him to see what can be done. And I mean, why not test the information that you have? There's just no excuse for that.
I think getting our senators and Congress people involved is a great idea. You know, I'm certainly willing to do it with our representatives up here in Connecticut, and then I'm also willing, and just think, soon we'll be able to travel again. I'm more than happy to drive down to Virginia if that's helpful. My brother Richard in Maryland is very committed to this thing, and my younger brother Jack has just moved from New York to Connecticut. We're totally on board if reaching out to members of Congress is going to help light a fire under our federal justice system. Personally, I'd like Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, to be answering questions in front of Congress about the Colonial Parkway murders. There's something very appealing.
I'd like to see that. That would be nice.
Yes, I would love to see that.
Yeah, that would be nice. I feel like we've been asking the same questions for 30 years. How does this happen? How does it get unanswered, unworked, and then
ignored?
Nobody's held accountable.
I want that job.
Right.
Well, Teri, you might be the only one of us who's qualified, actually.
No, thank you. I don't want to work for them.
Did you doing some detective work on myself?
Did you enjoy working in law enforcement, by the way?
I did enjoy it.
But not something you wanted to make a career out of?
Not in the 80s, I did not.
Do you mean
Things are different now.
As a woman, as a police officer in the 80s, right, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the kind of resistance that we saw on so many levels in so many different areas. I mean, Kathy certainly experienced it in the Navy, being in the second class with women, and just the amount of roadblocks and just harassment and all of the stuff that had to be thrown at you as a young police officer in the 80s. That stuff's
against the law now, but back in the 80s, it was not.
So whether it was sexual harassment or, or just making your life a living hell.
Miserable.
Yeah. It seems like there were a lot of people that were determined to make people that wanted to enter fields that were traditionally male dominated. They were doing everything they could to push people like you out.
Yeah, and it just wasn't worth it for that amount of money.
Mm-hmm. Would you do it again? If things were better?
Today. No. Not today. No.
Just because of the way law enforcement is viewed, or just a different life experience from your point of
view? They're not allowed to do their jobs anymore. I don't think I would do it. Mm-hmm. I feel sorry for police officers these days. I wouldn't do it. Not even for $1 million. I would not do it.
And last time I checked, it didn't pay $1 million. That's So let the record reflect that we actually expressed some sympathy and support for law enforcement.
I did not say the FBI. I said police officers. There's a difference. The actual people that go out and foot the roads and beat the roads there, not these cushy people that don't actually have to do the work.
Did any of the people that you worked with back then, did they stay in, or did they end up having long careers, or was it a mix?
They did, actually. Some retired from Newport News and went to other places, worked there, and retired again. Yeah, they're ate up with it.
Now, the two of you have continued to live in Virginia. Paula, you're in Williamsburg. Mm-hmm. Teri, you're in Northern Virginia. Mm-hmm. Do people stop you and ask you about Sandy's case?
Most people up here don't know anything about it.
And Paula, on a local level, do people, if they see your full name, do they ask about it?
Well, not so much anymore, but I do have friends, that are obviously aware of it. So when the show comes out, they'll reach out to me and say stuff. But I actually travel quite a bit up and down the Parkway. And the last week I've been up and down that Parkway a lot. I will still hear people reference things about the Parkway. And they'll say, bad things happen out there. And they don't know that they're saying it to somebody that bad thing happened to out there. And so, that's the only way. Nobody knows particularly, other than my friends, that it was my sister.
And you wouldn't respond to if someone made a passing comment like that. It sounds like you'd leave that alone.
Sometimes. Depends on who they are. No. Yeah, I have one girl that actually drove up and down that road a lot herself. And she said something about it. And I was like, oh, she and I were close enough that I could say, that was my sister. I mean, I wasn't somebody I'd just known in passing. She's like, oh, you're kidding. So, but not really. I don't get recognized on the streets by my name. So, not that way.
And Kristin, you drive the almost every day?
I do. Yeah. I also am in Williamsburg. I'm up and down the Parkway twice a day. And, same. It's a beautiful drive, and it is hard sometimes to reconcile what happened there with the fact that it is so beautiful. I was driving home a little bit ago, and park ranger had pulled somebody over, and park ranger was literally shaking their finger at this person.
Nice. They're getting the lecture.
they were getting a lecture. Yeah, they were actually getting a lecture. I was like, man, this is.
I was probably not far behind you. I ran in from driving down the Parkway to turn on my computer to do this podcast. And that I do love driving that road.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's slow. It's only 45. I'm not in a rush to get anywhere. So I always have to look over when I go past the York River Outlook.
Even though we know she wasn't there. We have nowhere else to go.
Right.
We have nowhere else to go. We don't know where she is. That's the hardest part about all this is we have no closure, no nothing. I have an angel in my front yard to put my flowers because I have nowhere else to put them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not fair. We took them to the Parkway for 20 years just because we had nowhere else to take them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm not taking them there anymore because that's not where she was. So I bought my own angel. I put them there.
I like it. The two of you have said many times that you are pretty confident, and I would agree with you, that Sandy and Keith weren't on the Parkway that night. It's just a place where Keith's Toyota Celica ended up being left.
Right.
I'll say that to my dying day. She wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I
agree.
Do you think something happened at the party at CNU, or?
I think it was between the party and my mom and dad's house.
I'm wondering if it happened. I'm wondering if it didn't happen in that parking lot at the apartment.
At the apartment.
There's too many people there to not see it.
I don't know. You could have gone. It could have happened behind the apartment. Their car could have been parked in the back. But I'm trying to figure out how you would have pulled them over. What caused them to stop?
What does that idea of them stopping, what does that steer you towards? Law enforcement?
Yeah, see, it doesn't make any sense. Maybe stop to get gas, but it's 1 o'clock, right? It's 1 o'clock, 1:30.
People have asked about a 7-Eleven or something like that, if they might have stopped somewhere.
7-Eleven's on the other side of the road.
Did Missy smoke?
Not that I know.
So she wouldn't have stopped for cigarettes or something like that. Being a gymnast and an athlete, she didn't look like a smoker to me, but I'm just trying to think of reasons to stop at a convenience store or a gas station besides needing gas.
At 1:30, right.
And if Keith was a reasonably together date, you'd think he'd have enough gas in his car to take this lovely young lady to the movies and the party and get her home without worrying about, I need gas for
But they were in their 20s. You thought about that. You thought about that at the last minute. Oh, yeah, I forgot to get gas. But yeah, I can't think of any reason why they would stop. And if they stopped, say, at a convenience store, how do you get both of them?
Those portable lights were easy to buy then, but they're still easy to buy.
In other words, to present your vehicle as law enforcement, even if you weren't actually a sworn officer.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Back to the party for a second. Supposedly, Sandy was in one room for a good portion of the evening, chatting with some friends, and supposedly Keith was in the kitchen kind of singing the blues about this longtime girlfriend of his, whom we've been in touch with. I mean, they'd broken up, or they were taking a break or whatever, and as Paula said, they were young. Some people have said they didn't really actually seem to spend that much time together that evening. So are they trying to keep their distance from one another at the party so that nobody's the wiser about the fact that they are out on a date? I mean, have you ever thought about that?
No, I just think they didn't really click.
I think it was a college party and you're walking around talking to your friends. I mean, I'm trying to remember.
I didn't go to those, so I don't know.
I mean, you just, at some point you hook up, but I don't know that, I don't know, maybe that's this day and age, but you don't hang on the side of somebody the whole time, especially since they both went to school there. Now, if it was he didn't know anybody, or she didn't know anybody, I could see where they would just hang together, but they both knew people at the party. So you just kind of like, but that's not also saying that the date wasn't a hit. So that's a possibility as well. But I don't think it's unusual that she's talking to her friends and he's talking to his, and then, that's normal. I feel like that's normal. Maybe I'm not a good date.
Oh, come on now.
I'd have left you and gone off and talked to my friends.
I'm hanging out with my people. Well, I mean, one of the things we've tried to figure out is if they left the party around 1 or 1:30, which is the story we've heard, is that consistent with what you've heard?
Yes.
And we think they're trying to make it home, that is, get Sandy home by a 2 a.m. curfew. The whole thing, by the way, makes me smile. Obviously, that was a long time ago for me. How hard was that 2 a.m. curfew? If they got in at 2:10, would that have been a problem? It sounds like your folks were pretty easygoing as long as they knew where you were.
Right.
Yeah, they already lived through Teri and I, so they were pretty slack at that point. They're like,
we found the same things. The two younger kids in our family, we felt like they had it so much easier. I'm my older brother Richard, then me, then my younger brother Jack, then Kathy, and we felt like, oh my gosh, we had to jump through flaming hoops for all of these things. And by the time they get to Kathy and Jack, they're like, no problem. Have a good time. No drink.
They're tired.
Just don't drink.
If I'd have been 10 minutes late, I'd have been grounded for a month.
Yeah, exactly. Don't drink and drive. Other than that, everything goes. I think we wore them out. And then, the younger siblings are like, hey, this is great. Mom and Dad.
Yeah.
So
that wasn't a hard and fast rule. I think even the night, she'd been at the party the night before, right? At the same
she had.
place.
I didn't know about this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There had been a party at the apartments the night before, and she and her girlfriend had gone.
Oh,
okay.
This is that social butterfly aspect that you were mentioning before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very pretty and popular.
Right. So and Susan, her friend, was at the party Saturday night as well.
Got it.
So
it
must have been.
There's only there's only enough Friday and Saturday nights. You got to pack in a lot of fun into
That's right.
into those weekend nights.
And there's only a finite amount of parties. So
That's right. Especially at CNU at the time.
right. Yeah.
So many parties, so little time. Do you think if they went to be romantic that the Colonial Parkway is extremely unlikely because of the 20 minutes out of the way aspect?
There's a place right across the street from the college, Lionsbridge. You didn't have to go.
Yeah.
You didn't have to go to the Parkway. It's right across the street.
What is it?
It's called Lionsbridge.
And is this a good place to go make out in 1988?
Oh, yeah. People go there all the time.
It's funny. Kristin seems to know it, too. So, obviously...
I didn't know people made out there.
Really?
Well, it just seemed like it's kind of out in the open, isn't it?
No, there's a park there.
It's near New Brittany's Park.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Nolan Trail runs right, past it. So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I'm familiar with the village. I don't go there with people.
But the places where you could actually park your car, though, when it felt like there weren't any, closest to the bridge, right? I don't know. I just didn't know people made out there. I didn't.
Let the record reflect.
Again, a bad date, I guess.
Either that or Paula wants maximum privacy. That's...
Well, the Parkway is not maximum privacy.
Well, I'll say this. As a visitor, when I first went to these pull-offs along the York River, where Kathy and Becky's car was found and where Keith's car was found, my first reaction years ago when I got out of my rental car or whatever and walked around was I thought these two places were far too close to the Colonial Parkway, the road. There's no privacy there.
There's not.
If you're going to go and be romantic, these two spots, which are a mile or so apart, as we discussed, my first reaction was, there's no way you go parking here. The road is right there. I think it's kind of weird. There's like zero privacy.
But there are the ones where you could actually park either back into the parking space or face the river, whereas their cars were running parallel with the river.
Yeah. No, I
wouldn't
agree.
be one of the spots you would pick at all.
No. If you wanted privacy, if you wanted to be romantic, neither one of those spots struck me as a great choice to make out.
Right. And plenty of places along the way that you could go instead.
Right. Teri seems to know all of them, actually.
Yes. Especially in Newport News, she probably busted a few people.
I did.
I was thinking that was probably you as a date on the one hand, and then later on, a couple of years later, when you're a police officer, you're like, did you do the rapping on the window thing?
A couple times, but CNU was my district.
What are those interactions like for you as a police officer? Do you walk up alongside and rap on the window?
Yeah.
And
it's embarrassing.
For the officer or for the couples?
A little both. It's not something you like to do, but as long as they're adults, it's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. But if they're minors, it's not a good thing. And because then you have to call their parents to come get them.
Speaking of, how often would the interaction extend to driver's license and registration? Does that happen most of the time?
Every time.
Every time.
Every time.
Was that required back then when you were a young police officer?
Oh, yeah. Every time.
So, in other words, this actually is something we've never talked about.
Yeah, I didn't think about that either.
The routine is you ask for driver's license and registration. They're not necessarily doing anything wrong, right?
Right. Well, first of all, you have to make sure that the person's not kidnapped.
Right.
You have to make sure they're not a minor.
Oh, this is interesting. Teri, I really didn't know this. So in other words, you wouldn't just rap on the window and say, move it along. You actually go through the routine, driver's license and registration.
Yep. I want to see IDs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. From both people.
Both people.
Driver and passenger.
Yep.
This is actually really helpful. What did you do with the driver's license and registration? You take them and you go back to the car. Then what happens?
Well, if they were adults, then I sent them on their way. But if it was minors, then I get in touch with their parents.
And you mean anybody that's under 18?
Yeah.
Even if they weren't drinking or anything?
They're out there doing stuff they're not supposed to be doing. I want to know if their parents know that's where they are.
Well, I want to drill down a little bit. Is kissing something they're not supposed to be doing?
Oh, no. If their clothes are off, their parents are going to know.
Oh, okay, you had to be a little more specific. We're thinking, oh, my God.
I was thinking, wait a minute.
Their clothes are off.
All this time I was breaking the law.
Is kissing, is kissing against the law?
No.
Okay. So actually, when you step away, that's an opportunity for people to kind of neaten up and maybe button up or whatever. Are you going to run the license or look at the license and registration if they're two kids kissing in a car?
Oh, no. I just want to see how old they are.
Right.
Make sure. Yeah.
It's been a long time since I was...
He's 18 and she's 13. That ain't happening.
Right. And actually, in Robin Edwards' David Knobling example, she is a minor. Yeah. She's 14 years old.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then how often does it reach a point? And again, actually, I'm not talking about 2021 here. I'm talking about back in the 80s. When would it reach a point where you would actually call it in and run a license and registration?
It all depends.
Would they have to have been doing something illegal? In other words, you wouldn't just do it as a matter of routine.
No. No.
Once you've ascertained their...
I would have given the dispatcher the license or the license plate when I stopped, just because I wouldn't have known what it was. You always, when you checked out, you gave the license plate.
Of the car you're approaching is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And is that for the officer's safety?
Right.
Basically, you say your number or whatever, and you say you're doing a traffic...
Yeah, I'm checking on that vehicle, and I give them the license plate.
Right. That's just in case anything, heaven forbid, happened to you.
Right. They knew what car to go look for.
Right. They knew whose vehicle you were approaching.
Yeah.
Got it. It's funny, actually. We've never had a former police officer like yourself that we could ask those questions. You're going to ask for a driver's license and a registration in almost every routine stop.
Yep.
So if a police officer, and I'm going somewhere with this, if a police officer or an imposter was attempting to present the same kind of scenario that a real police officer doing routine work would do, they would ask for those driver's licenses and proceed.
And they would ask for the passengers too.
Interesting.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah. I think that's going to give us something to think about.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Teri and Paula, for joining us. We really appreciate the time and energy you spent with us today. We know this can be a difficult subject, but we appreciate your willingness to talk to us about it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
We look forward to talking with you again soon.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mind Over Murder. We'll see you next time.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristin Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawlspace Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas56.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.